Hello everyone and welcome. In this video we're going to be checking out the 2014 Toyota Corolla. Now this is one of the most sold nameplates in the world, so I'm very curious to find out why. This is a four-door compact sedan with seating for 5, and this particular trim is the Corolla S. The rear trunk does communicate with the key fob, so if you approach the vehicle and it's still locked, you can still open it simply by opening it as you usually would. There's also a button on the key fob to open it. Cargo space is decent, and you can fold down the 2 rear seats, which have a 60-40 split. Underneath the floor cover, you've got your spare tire and tools. Up front, fog lights and LED headlights. This is a pretty aerodynamic vehicle with a drag coefficient of 0.28. As tested, this vehicle's MSRP is $23,570. So let's take a look under the hood. Now, as is the case nowadays, there is a plastic engine cover, but that is pretty easily removable. And everything is pretty well laid out. You know, there's a decent amount of space between everything. There's a good amount of space in front of the engine, there's a good amount of space in front of the radiator, to the sides. So let's take a look at our service points. We've got our windshield washer fluid on the left, our radiator fill cap up front for coolant, engine oil fill, ZRW20, and the engine oil dipstick. On the right, we've got our air filter, and it's just 2 simple clips to remove that. Also the fuse box here on the right, and that's just a single clip that you can pop off to get access to the fuses. The battery up front, not ideal from a weight distribution point of view, but it is very easy to access. The brake reservoir is a bit buried in here, but there are some tabs so you can actually pop out this upper portion and get access to it. This is a 1.8 liter inline 4-cylinder with aluminum block and heads. It features dual overhead cams with 16 valves and dual variable valve timing on both the intake and exhaust. This engine produces 132 horsepower at 6,000 RPM and 128 pound-feet of torque at 4,400 RPM. And interesting fact, this engine is also used in the Lotus Elise with a supercharger added on. So let's follow the path of the intake air. So we have our initial intake down here, which is going to pull the air through, up through the air filter, and then over to the throttle body. Now this is an electronically controlled throttle body, and from there it will move into the intake manifold. Plastic, as you can see, it seems to be the going trend, from the intake manifold into the engine cylinders. After traveling through the engine, it passes through the exhaust manifold and then through the catalytic converter. It then travels through a single exhaust pipe and exits through a single tailpipe. Power is sent to the 2 front wheels through a CVT transmission. These are 17-inch wheels wrapped in 215/45 Firestone rubber. Up front, everything pretty simple. 10.8-inch disc brakes matched with a MacPherson strut style suspension. Here you can see the drive axle coming from the transmission, and on the other side the steering link as well as the anti-roll bar. 10.2-inch disc brakes in the rear matched with a torsion beam suspension. And since this is a suspension which I haven't yet made a video on, let's just talk a little bit about how it works. As you can see, there's a trailing arm here, and that's the only thing that the brake and wheel are actually connecting to, is this trailing arm, which is connected to the torsion beam which goes across the end of the vehicle. So there you can see the torsion beam going all the way across, and inside of it the anti-roll bar. So basically how this works, when the left side hits a bump or something like that and this wheel moves up, it's going to move this control arm here up, and that in turn is going to move the torsion beam, which you see to the right, and bend it up and twist it as well. So that bending and twisting is what's going to be resisting the motion of this, as well as the spring and shock absorber here to dampen that out. Now, the torsion beam is stronger in bending than it is in torsion, so that's why you see this anti-roll bar added in there. So as that thing twists, this anti-roll bar will twist with it, and then basically make the suspension less independent, forcing up the other wheel when one wheel goes up, which is exactly how anti-roll bars work. So let's have a look at the interior. Keyless entry and smart door handle, so you can open it simply by pulling on the handle. You can lock it by pressing towards the front of it. And this is actually a pretty quick responding one, unlike some of the other ones I've tested where you kind of pull on the handle and it doesn't yet unlock. 8-way electronically adjustable front driver's seat and leather seats all around. So, checking out the interior, plenty of legroom on these seats. Leather seats are pretty comfortable. They are firm, but they are comfortable as well. Now, my knees don't really come into contact with anything. Instead, I kind of hit the bolsters with my legs. So that's pretty nice. Plenty of space for your legs and plenty of adjustment in the front driver's seat. The steering wheel, leather wrapped, also firm but also comfortable. I do like the steering wheel. Now, as far as visibility out the front and to the sides is pretty good. Out the rear is a little narrow, but you also do have a reverse camera, so that's nice. The rear view mirror also plenty wide and gives you plenty of visibility out through the rear window. Now, one of the things that surprised me the most about this vehicle being an economy car was just how many features it has. And even though this is the top of the line Corolla, the Corolla S, it still has an abundance of features. We've got power mirrors left and right, power windows with an automatic driver's window, power locks, power adjustable front driver's seat. On the steering wheel, we've got audio controls and Bluetooth for your phone controls. You can change the display with this button here, look at your average MPGs or your fuel economy, your instantaneous fuel economy. You have a navigation system, and it also displays the weather here, which is pretty interesting. Also, the audio system is actually pretty good, and the buttons themselves have a pretty good feel to them. They've got some resistance, and they don't feel super cheap. You also have automatic climate control. I guess my one complaint with this system, though, would be just how you select the different, where you want the air to blow is this kind of scroll through where you go, oh, defrost and lower, or, you know, selecting that. So that could be a little bit better if it was just a push exactly where you wanted, you know, the different vents to blow. But the fact that it has automatic climate control is pretty cool. You've got heated front seats with both high and low settings. That's pretty nice. You've got USB connectivity as well as an auxiliary cable input for audio and a 12-volt power supply. You also have the ability to turn off traction control as well as stability control. So that's pretty cool that they've done that, as well as a sport mode, which I'll talk about more when I'm driving it. 2 cup holders up here in front, and actually there's this kind of divider in the center which conveniently holds a phone. I don't know whether or not they did that intentionally, but it is pretty nice because it holds a iPhone pretty well. For the center armrest, there's actually 2 different things you can do. You've got this center tray here, and then you can also open up to underneath below it. So it doesn't have a removable tray, which a lot of cars are going to these days, and I really like that. I think those removable trays are super cheap, and this is a much better option to have these 2 dividers. It also has a push-button start, which is pretty cool to see, and unbelievably paddle shifters. So Toyota Corolla, and it comes with paddle shifters. It actually has 7 different ratios which it uses, because this is, of course, a CVT, as I mentioned earlier. Rear legroom, believe it or not, is actually excellent. It has more than 3 inches more than the second best rear legroom car that I've tested so far. So I've tested a Lexus sedan, a Ford sedan, and 2 SUVs, and of those, this has more than 3 inches more rear legroom. So pretty phenomenal that you can actually fit 4 adults in this vehicle. Now, rear headroom is a little bit limited, but it's okay. Some other things to note, you do have power windows, and they do go all the way down, and there is a cup holder here in the center, which does feel a bit cheap. Okay, so let's take it for a test drive. Now, I was reading several reviews for this car online before driving it and testing it out. And a lot of people seem to focus on the fact that it's a boring car to drive, and you know, all they say is, oh, it's just super boring to drive. And I think that's kind of missing the whole point of what this car is. It's an economy car, it's front wheel drive, and it's low power. Of course it's not fun to drive, you know? But what this car is doing, I think, is basically perfectly executing what the market wants. You know, most people aren't car enthusiasts, so building a car for car enthusiasts isn't going to work. For the overall market, you know, a car is just a tool to get you from point A to point B, and this is one that does a lot of the things that you'd want a car to do very well. It gets good fuel economy, it has a history of reliability, you know, you want practicality, and this has more rear legroom than any other car I've tested, so it's practical. And it has plenty of features, and if you're someone who doesn't want all those features, then you can get a different version of it and have less features and pay less. So it kind of accommodates everyone out there. Now, as far as driving it, a lot of the things I have no really compliments or complaints. You know, it's just kind of easy and straightforward. The steering is simple, the throttle pedal is simple. As far as the brake pedal, I do actually really like the way the brake pedal feels. It reminds me quite a bit of the Subaru Legacy that I tested, and that was my favorite brake pedal feel of any car that I've tested so far. Now, with the CVT, there are 2 driving modes. There's the regular driving mode, and then there's also a sport button. So when you press that sport button, it actually increases the RPMs by using a higher gear ratio. and it keeps you in a higher gear ratio. So you're pretty much always going to be at a higher gearing and have a bit more response when you press down on the gas pedal. And as far as the CVT is concerned, in sport mode, it just throws it up to the high RPMs. It doesn't waste any time in the lower RPMs getting to the power. It just throws it all the way past 5,000 RPM, and it keeps it past 5,000 RPM when you leave your foot down. Now, this also features, very surprisingly, paddle shifters. And the other surprising thing is they're actually the best paddle shifters I've used so far. They're the quickest to respond as far as gear change, and the gear changes are actually pretty smooth, which is pretty impressive considering the budget car that this is. But shifts are direct and quick. Now, it's a CVT, so it has kind of an advantage over traditional automatic transmissions where they have a little bit of lag in switching gears, and this kind of does it instantaneously. But even still, it shifts gears pretty quick. There isn't really a noticeable pause between gear shifts like there is with automatic transmissions. Now, that said, I've never tested a DCT, so I'm sure if I compared it to a dual clutch transmission, the shifts probably wouldn't feel quite as accurate or precise or as quick. Now, on the comment that this isn't a particularly fun car to drive, and I mean, that's the case because it's front wheel drive and it has 132 horsepower and it's an economy car. But even still, I really like the way the CVT operates because it doesn't waste time in getting those high RPMs when you want it. So if you stick it in sport mode and you want to get some power, it doesn't waste time like other transmissions do and they stay in the lower RPM at wide open throttle. It just skips ahead to 5,000 RPM and then off you go. And it doesn't feel slow or anything like that. I mean, for 132 horsepower, it really moves pretty quick. So, driving on the highway, we're doing about 65. There definitely is a bit of cabin noise as far as the tires and wind and different cars going by. So it's not that quiet of an interior. That said, I wouldn't say it's unacceptable. You know, this car weighs less than 2,900 pounds and it gets good fuel economy because it's so light. So, you know, you kind of make these sacrifices where you don't have quite the quiet interior of other vehicles when you remove that kind of weight. But, I mean, like I said, it's not unacceptable. It's just a decent amount of road noise. So I've completed my usual fuel economy test run. It's about a 53-mile course with some city and hills mixed in, but mostly highway. This car is rated 29 in the city, 37 on the highway. And as you can see on the course, it achieved 40.8 miles per gallon. So very impressive fuel economy, getting over 40 miles per gallon. And this is just a traditional engine, non-hybrid, so pretty impressive. So overall, my impressions of the vehicle, starting with the things that I don't like so much. Both the tachometer and the speedometer kind of have a cheap appearance to them. It's kind of a tacky blue little dial gauge system, and it just doesn't really fit with the rest of the car. Another thing, the two rear cup holders seem pretty cheap. And finally, there is a bit of cabin noise, and I wouldn't say it's unacceptable, but it's just one of the things to kind of point out. Now, what do I like about the car? Well, it's cost effective. You get great gas mileage. I got over 40 miles per gallon on my test run. You can seat 4 people comfortably. There's plenty of rear legroom. The sound system's actually pretty good. The interior features are all pretty good. The paddle shifters, they actually work really well, which is surprising. Usually I don't end up liking paddle shifters. They all kind of leave me wanting something more because they're so unresponsive. This one's actually pretty quick to change gears. Overall, for the price, as a tool that gets you from point A to point B, it just seems to do everything pretty well and at a good price point, so I can't really fault it in many ways. Overall, it's just a great vehicle. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. Thanks for watching.